Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. We are here today to chat about an upcoming early 2026 release called The Storm by Rachel Hawkins. This is a mystery thriller that releases on January 6th, 2026, and I was honored to have received a widget of this one. I have read all of Rachel Hawkins' adult thrillers via NetGalley originally, and then I always end up with a physical copy of her thrillers, and I was very excited to receive a widget for this one as well. For the last several years, she has published a thriller at the beginning of the year, but in 2025 she did not do a new adult release. So that makes her 2026 one all the more exciting because it's been almost 2 years since her last thriller release. Typically, my reviews go in order of synopsis, content warnings, my rating, and then my thoughts on the plot and character content, as well as my overall feelings at the end of the video. I do want to say also that I like to share, of course, positive reviews on my channel, but I also like to be honest. So not every review you see in my book review series is a positive review. This one will be very middle of the road, and I'll explain why in a little while, but I do just want to give a heads up for that. But to chat a little bit about the synopsis first for this one. In this book, we are following our main character, Geneva, and she runs a small town inn on the coast of a beach in Alabama. This hotel has been in her family for generations and has survived a lot of hurricanes that have hit this town over the years. She is kind of living her life, just not loving her job and just the debt that she is falling into, trying to keep up with an inn that is just not doing well, when two new guests show up just a few weeks before an upcoming hurricane to write a book about a very sordid story that happened in the town for decades before. We have these two new characters. Their names are Lo and August. August is a journalist who is trying to write a book about Lo's story. Lo was accused 40 years before of murdering the governor's son right on the beach where this hotel is in the middle of a hurricane, and she was eventually proven not guilty, but of course everyone has their thoughts on her, and suddenly they want to write a book together. And so they come back to this town where everything happened and they're writing this book. But while they're there, a hurricane, a new one, is approaching and the stakes start to raise. Geneva learns a lot about the hotel's past, the town's past, as well as her own family's pasts, and the truth about where she actually comes from. And this is very much a slow burn mystery thriller where we get to see everything about our main character's life change when she finally learns the truth. Content warnings for this book do include death, light sexual content, pregnancy, natural disasters, infidelity, blood, violence, loss of loved ones, and grief. I have read every single adult thriller that Rachel Hawkins has published. I think I've already said that. Nothing that I've read by her has been less than 4 stars. I've gotten to meet the author, gotten my book signed by her, and I was so excited to receive a NetGalley ARC of this upcoming release. But unfortunately, and I will of course explain why in a moment, I ended up giving this one 3 stars, which to date is my lowest rated Rachel Hawkins book. If you like natural disasters, looming storms, and secrets from decades before finally being revealed, I do still think you should pick this one up. But there were some issues that I personally had just trying to understand the story, which I'll dive into in just a moment. But moving back to the plot for a few minutes, the plot and the setting, because the setting very much plays a role in the plot of this book. We do have multiple timelines in this one. We follow the past, and the past timelines always occur right around these 3 or 4 major hurricanes that have already hit the beach town that we are in, and we are following the things that happened during those hurricanes that do connect to the present time and the characters in the present. And then we are also following, of course, the present with Geneva and Lo in August at this hotel, writing this book and learning the truth about what happened the night that Lo was accused of murdering the governor's son. I felt more interested in the past timelines for sure. I feel as though a lot of Rachel Hawkins' most recent thriller and mystery releases have been very slow burn, and while I do enjoy that a lot, this one just felt like nothing was happening except for when we were reading the past timeline. In the past timeline, we are reading about things that are happening literally in the eye of a storm, of a hurricane that is full force coming onto the beach. There is so much that happens with Lo and her friend group in the past, and we get to see those things play out. And I feel like in the present time, we are doing a lot of sitting and waiting around. And yes, there are a few things that happen, but I feel as though most of the action happens in the past until you get to the last 3 or 4 chapters of this book. The plot of the present feels very stagnant overall, whereas the past is where you truly get that action and intensity that leads you up into the storm that is on its way to the coast in the present timeline. I do have to say though that I loved the trope of natural disasters in this one. I have really enjoyed thrillers that take place in the middle of storms, under the ocean, in hurricanes, and all these very natural elements of life, whether it's in the chamber of a submarine or in the middle of a hurricane, whether it's in this book or in other thrillers that I've read. I really enjoy this idea of natural settings and nature working against you, and I do think that was a very fascinating aspect of this plot. Of course, as I've already mentioned, throughout the entire present, we are building up to a storm that is very quickly approaching, and in the past we are in the middle of hurricanes as the years go by, and I did find that element of the book very fascinating. The characters in this one are sort of where my enjoyment ended up being dwindled, because I honestly was just very suspended over the characters and what was going on in the story. And by that I mean that I had a hard time understanding the why behind so much of what happened in this one. Geneva's character was fine enough. I liked her for a thriller. I thought she was pretty likable, and I'm glad that she ended up being relatively okay as you can be in the situation that she was in. But my main cause of confusion came from Lo and August's characters and why they were even in the town in the first place. The murder that Lo is accused of happened 40 years prior to the present, and although it was a very big deal at the time, I don't understand why it needed to be such a big deal in the present timeline. There was nobody in the town that was like, oh my gosh, this alleged murderer is back, or people who were still talking about her. I could not understand why now, or why they were back in town to write a book when the murder happened before most of the townspeople were even alive. Geneva wasn't even alive when the murder happened, and I had a really hard time understanding why August felt so inclined to write this book, and why it had to be now, and why they had to go back to the hotel, and why it was such a big deal to them that Lo was finally telling her story when, like, she had lived her entire life knowing the truth, and like she was in the press already, and she was no longer in the press, of course, because so many years have passed, but all of a sudden she's like, I have to write this book. And so I think that motivation of those two characters confused me. And of course, in thrillers, you get plot twists and you get to know the reveals that happen by the end of the book. And so we do get to see eventually sort of what the motivation was for this book being written, but I had a very hard time for probably 85% of the story really understanding the point of right now coming into town to write a book, when I'm pretty sure everybody had forgotten the governor's son and the murder that had happened in the first place for the most part. So I don't know why it had to be a big deal. And I think that is where most of my confusion came from, because they are such a huge part of the story. The story is not told from their POVs in the present, but they are so involved in Geneva's life at this inn for the time that they are there. But the entire time I just didn't understand why they were there in the first place, if that makes sense. So that entire motivation aspect to these characters doing what they did, writing this book, was very blurred for most of the story for me personally. And because of this, as I've already mentioned, I felt a little bit suspended over the plot, being able to see into what was going on but not understanding the why. And maybe it would have been different if we had followed their POVs, and obviously there's a point to why we did not, but I just couldn't get all the way behind these characters and why we were even here in the first place. 3 stars is by no means a bad rating. It's very middle of the road for me personally. I give a lot of books 3 stars. Doesn't mean that I hated them by any means. Doesn't even mean that I disliked them. I just thought that they were okay. When you pick up a Rachel Hawkins book, you can be certain of bingeability and addictiveness, and that was very much the case in this one still. It is such a short read at just under 300 pages, or just over. I think on Goodreads it's labeled as 304 pages, but I flew through this one so quickly I didn't want to put it down. But some of those character motivations just kind of confused me and left me feeling unsatisfied for a large chunk of the book. By the time that we got to the plot twists and the reveals at the end, I just didn't necessarily feel satisfied. So although I did not love this one, I did like it well enough. I loved the natural disaster and the nature elements in this one. The setting of this book very much played a role in the plot, which overall I really enjoyed. I think Rachel Hawkins does such a great job with atmospheric settings, and that is very evident in this one as well. This is probably the most chaotic Rachel Hawkins book I've read. That is not by any means a bad thing. It's very slow burn, but there's also a lot of chaos that happens in the shift between past and present, and it was fun overall. Not my favorite one that I've read by her, but I did still like it, and I do hope that you have this one on your radar when it comes out on January 6th. 2026. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read anything by this author or if anything by her on your TBR. I do very much recommend Rachel Hawkins overall. I have very much enjoyed her thrillers and mysteries over the years, and I'm excited to see how well this one does when it releases. But that is all that I have for today's quick book review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.